Hello, and welcome to the Direct-to-Device and NTN Commercialization webinar. My name is Samaya Nadrali, and I'm a manager at Novaspace, the leading global consulting firm dedicated to the space sector. Thank you for joining us today for this new webinar in the GSOA webinar series. This webinar is brought to you in partnership with Proactive PR International and Novaspace, bringing valuable expertise in working with industry leaders and promoting high-quality content. Their support will help us continue to showcase our members, drive meaningful discussions, and address the critical issues shaping the satellite and communications ecosystem. I'll start by introducing our panelists today. We are joined by Jassim Nassar, Chief Growth Officer of Space Services at Space42, Dan Dooley, Chief Commercial Officer at Link, Prasanna Nagarajan, Chief Technology Officer at OQ Technologies, and Gianluca Rodolfi, Chief Business Officer at Sateliot. Direct-to-device and NTN have become such an important topic across both satellite and mobile industries. Novaspace recently issued its direct-to-device and IoT market intelligence report covering key trends and developments, mergers and acquisition activity, and market forecasts for this sector. Over the next decade, the market is projected to generate more than $85 billion cumulatively, driven by growing device compatibility, expanding MNO partnerships, greater access to spectrum, and continued progress in satellite infrastructure. In the near term, many of the strongest use cases are centered on SOS emergency text and other safety-driven services, but over time, the bigger revenue opportunity is expected to come from direct-to-phone mobile broadband services, alongside a large and growing satellite cellular IoT market base. So today's discussion is really about how the industry moves from early adoption and promising trials towards scalable, sustainable commercial services. With that, let me turn to our first question. What do you find is materially different in 2026 that makes you say D2D and NTN are now commercially real and not just technically possible? And Dan, I'll lean on you to get us started.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Dan Dooley. For the last 5 years, I've been the Chief Commercial Officer of Link Global. We have invented the technology to connect a satellite moving at 8 kilometers a second, 500 kilometers above the Earth to standard phones. And I think, to answer your question, we're starting to see live services. We're seeing, I live in the United States. I have T-Mobile. I can sign up via the app on my and pay $10 and get a satellite service. So it's become real. Over the last 5 years, we went from I don't think it's going to work to okay, it might work to okay, I've seen a trial, and now you really see it in market throughout the globe, and you see many other folks who are actively looking to get constellations up to be able to participate in this gigantic opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. And Jassim, if you want to add on to that and maybe share a little bit more about Space42's D2D services.
Sure, thank you, Sumaya. So Space42 is a UAE-based space technology company focused on delivering advanced satellite communications and geospatial intelligence solutions with a strong emphasis on enabling seamless connectivity through integration of non-terrestrial networks with terrestrial mobile systems. Building on the legacy of systems and brands, including Threya and the broader capabilities of geospatial analytics platforms, Space42 aims to provide ubiquitous, resilient, and secure connectivity for mobility, government, and enterprise sectors, in particular with respect to emerging D2D direct-to-device use cases. Beyond communications, also the company leverages Earth observation, AI-driven analytics, and digital platforms to support decision-making across different sectors. With respect to D2D specifically, the answer from Space42 is what we announced back in September 2025, which is the launch of Equitas. Equitas is a neutral, multi-participant shared infrastructure. It's going to operate with open standards 3GPP-based connectivity to offer D2D services, whether for the smartphone, the consumer segment, the enterprise with the IoT use cases and applications, as well as advanced MSS applications and services. in a way that complements the mobile networks and the offerings from the mobile operators.
Prasanna, thank you for joining us today. I just wanted to get you started and have you introduce yourself a little bit and share with us maybe what you see as materially different in 2026 that makes you say D2D and NTN are now commercially real.
Absolutely. Hi everyone. This is Prasanna Nagarajan, Chief Technology Officer from OQ. OQ Technology has been in the business for over a decade now, and we have achieved many industry firsts in terms of delivering, demonstrating, and delivering the first NB-IoT service from space. Also now demonstrating, becoming the first European player to demonstrate 5G services from space since as of last December, demonstrating emergency broadcast services. And now we see that there's a lot of momentum gaining, not just in the US or specific markets, but also across the globe. We see interests in terms of NTN and D2D connectivity. And it's not just because people want access to satellite connectivity. It's becoming more of a sovereign necessity for different countries to be able to have control over their data. And it's not just, as I said, people, but government institutions, stakeholders from emergency and first response organizations, UN related organizations supporting UN efforts. We see many clienteles from different industry verticals asking for such a service, and we see that this is going to be, let's say, the reality in the next couple of months, if not in the next year, as we also see leading chip makers and device manufacturers looking into this actively from various road shows and trade shows, such as the MWC, where MediaTek and Qualcomm as well demonstrated such capabilities with their upcoming chipsets and devices.
Absolutely. So the recent developments in the industry are certainly supporting the path towards commercialization. And Gianluca, maybe last but not least, a little introduction on Sateliot, and perhaps if there's anything you want to add on how we see 2026 really paving the way for D2D and NTN capabilities.
Yeah, thanks, Maya, and I'm very happy to see all my colleagues. It's a small world, so we basically know all of us. So we started Sateliot now already 7 years ago, and with the focus since the beginning of being working on the standard on 3GPP. We've been seeing many things happen in the past. What we know, and if we learn one thing, is that space is hard. It takes time, and so we've been able to launch. There are a lot of announcements, no, around where we are the first. We are the first, and the end. We are doing our work. We are delivering. That's what we are seeing in the market. We are specialized in IoT, NTN IoT, 3GPP. We have our service live with the customers, which is the most important part. And we also announced this year that we are moving to Gen 2 satellites that are absolutely a big change. There are huge satellites of 160 kilograms that are produced here in Barcelona in our premises. That's probably we are the best position in Europe for the new constellation of 3GPP Release 17, which is IoT, and a new radio, which is the D2D. D2D is a reality now, not really under the standard. It's coming probably next year and the following years. It's going to take some time. There are some tests and some services, as Dan said. That's what's happening in a few countries. You can have the service. At the beginning, we said, okay, maybe it's not going to work. Then it's working. Limitations are there. So the new wave that we all expect is new radio, which is the standard D2D, and we are very well positioned to be there. The cycles in space are super long. I mean, all of us we know it, and we're gonna see in the next year many solutions that are going to be in the market.
Yeah, and you said it yourself, right? The market is becoming real, and we are seeing commercialization of services, particularly in certain countries like the US and parts of Europe. So one of the questions that's being asked in the industry is, where is the revenue showing up first? How are we making money from offering direct-to-device services today? So, Prasanna, maybe I'll let you speak first on this one. Where do you see the first meaningful revenue pools emerging? Would you say it's in consumer messaging, IoT services, or are there other enterprise and government opportunities that can support early revenue generation?
Absolutely. So I think when we are speaking about NTN, in our opinion, we have already commercialized IoT. And when we're speaking of IoT, we are not just the only one in the market today. Let's say it took a little while for the MNOs to catch on for IoT, but we started making our first revenue from enterprise and let's say industrial clients where they wanted coverage in remote and let's say population sparse areas where they wanted monitoring capabilities for their assets. Now, that was back in 2021, 2022. We are talking about fast forward to 2026. We already see a lot of interest from various MNOs across the globe. I think all my colleagues here can already agree that we have been pretty active, not just OQ, but all the players in IoT. We have been signing up multiple MNO agreements, roaming agreements, thanks to the GSM standardization as well. So for me, the IoT part is already commercial and it is ramping up with MNOs and MVNOs being a key part of the business cooperation and also enterprise clients. Besides this, definitely there's a lot of interest upcoming on the IoT side for government and institutional stakeholders, again, for asset monitoring capabilities like smart metering companies, like agri-tech companies, and energy farms, and so on. And speaking of D2D, we see that there is a lot of interest when it comes to emergency responses, right? So, in terms of disaster relief, we have been contracted already by multiple disaster recovery organizations who want access to satellite connectivity for not just their emergency responders, which I think is a key, let's say, aspect that they're looking into. They also want a backup and a resilient network that will be available when terrestrial infrastructures fail. And for this, why this is important is because if you take the recent catastrophes in Valencia, one of the major reasons why, even though the cellular warning system or the emergency system existed, one of the major reasons for the failure was simply because the terrestrial infrastructure was already destroyed, and therefore the general public could not get the alerts or send out SOS requests. And for this, we at OQ believe that satellite is a genuine backup service, and these are the kind of services they're looking at. And we believe that this will definitely extend into government and institutional clients, and also we anticipate to see mass adoption by MNOs and MVNOs where satellite players come as backup scenario when terrestrial infrastructure fails for emergency services. And definitely SMS, adding SMS to that part enhances the services that we can provide during such scenarios. And key vertical that is picking up interest here is the government clientele because of sovereign reasons. And I think given the current geopolitical scenario, this is becoming one of our important markets to focus on, besides, of course, the MNO and standard MNO and MVNO segment and the mass user segment that will eventually evolve.
Yep, certainly, and we're seeing that across trials and also in the US, with AT&T FirstNet and others adopting that kind of service. We expect to see that around the world. Dan, did you want to add into that and share some thoughts on that topic as well?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I'll echo. I think whenever you give folks more connectivity, the use cases are abundant. So there are millions of use cases because it's a standard, and there are, over 6 billion standard devices out there. The use cases are everything from what you talked about with IoT, connected cars, backup solution, government. But my opinion is that the main revenue driver in the future is the mainstream product that we can create and give, consumers and businesses connectivity and go beyond just messaging, go to light data, go to quote heavy data. And I think that that's where the predominantly the revenue is going to be driven is from offering, services through MNOs to their existing subscribers and filling out their coverage map, and so that there is not a spot on the earth that doesn't have coverage. And I think that that's going to be the main driver of the revenue, in the future.
Yep, certainly. And Gianluca, Shasim, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be repeating what the earlier panelists said, but I think the first meaningful revenue pools, I think, are likely to come from consumer messaging and emergency services, simply because they have the lowest friction and the clearest sort of willingness to pay. I think back to OQ, IoT is probably also the largest or one of the largest volume opportunity over time, simply because it taps into enterprise market segments like logistics, energy, agriculture, mining, and asset monitoring. So, number of devices, the volume is going to be high, and the ARPU levels, I think, are going to be also sort of moderate for IoT use cases, which is very interesting in the context of D2D. I think Dan also mentioned government. So enterprises and government are attractive early because of resilience and because of remote coverage and mission continuity. These are being extremely important factors for these segments, which allows them to justify premium pricing. So those segments, I think, are sort of the early pools of revenue for D2D. And from there, like Dan said, I think it is very important to evolve over time and move from messaging and texting and voice into data and heavy data. And I think that's the plan for D2D anyway, because the idea is to catch up and with the terrestrial standards and with the terrestrial networks to be able to cover the gap. So today, while we're talking about 5G, but also we're considering what's happening within 6G and how satellite can become sort of native and default as part of the 3GPP standards for 6G.
Yeah, absolutely. And in relation to that, we actually have a question that came through the chat that might be related to that topic. So a question from Senzo. His question is based on AI agents and with the upcoming release of 3GPP 19 standards, where there will be the introduction of G and the possibility of self-optimizing networks due to these agents. What does that mean for the industry as a whole? And do you see there being possible risks or something to consider with the potential shift as we push forward through release 19 of the 3GPP standards?
Sure. I think I can go for it if that's okay. Well, risks, I think, are always part of innovation and new technology, and that's how we should see it. When This just reminds me of the first days when cellular standards was introduced. People were worried that cell phone towers are going to cause cancer, brain tumors, and so on. And I think that is exactly why standards exist, right? And that's the best thing about standards. It's not just somebody waking up one day deciding to put up a new technology here. There are over hundreds of companies involved, thousands of delegates involved in standardizing service that is being delivered to mass public. And the way we should look at AI is how we have looked at cellular standards for the last couple of decades. And I think, and I'm pretty confident that 3GPP will find ways to standardize the use of AI and not just monetize it, and also let the entire service sector benefit from AI. And I think it's very important. We see this as one of the most important shifts in the coming decade, and that's exactly how we should see it.
If I can comment very quickly on this, I mean, sorry, Senzo, I had to reread the question. I mean, AI is a revolution. I mean, many things we thought were a revolution then didn't materialize as a revolution. AI is there to stay. We see it everywhere. We don't think it's something specific just for technical, but it's across all the areas of any business. we have a very structured approach for AI, and we've been, I would say, quite successful in having the AI and AI agents supporting us on all the aspects of it. So yes, there will be. It's not a competition between engineers and AI agents, but the good thing is that AI agents can be a multiplier of the productivity of the engineers, and that's where we see the differentiator.
Thank you. Thanks for your inputs.
I think
Maybe
if I
staying on the same. Oh, sorry.
if
Go
I
ahead.
can address the same question, I think from a different angle. So using AI is going to be important in terms of network optimization. As we deal with limited capacity and limited spectrum, using AI will allow us to better manage or smartly manage network resources, which will allow us to address more subscribers and more terminals. On the other hand, as well, AI on the device side, it opens up new use cases because now you don't need to look into multiple of documents, and AI can summarize for you a large document into a brief one pager that can be used or communicated through the D2D over NTN. So AI itself, I think it opens up new use cases for us as satellite operators and providers of D2D services.
And a discussion we were having on how value is coming to the D2D market. So with commercialization of service and early revenue generation. Another question I had was on where value is accruing across the ecosystem. So what does the recent M&A activity in the market tell you about where value is accruing? Is it with spectrum, operator relationships, device access, or something else?
Yeah, so I can start with this one. So at the highest level, you need four things, right, to make direct-to-device a mainstream product. You need the spectrum. That's very important. And all the spectrum we can get, it's the scarcest resource in the mobile network operator world. I come from the mobile network operator world versus the satellite world, and I can tell you that spectrum is the scarcest resource. So more spectrum, the better. You obviously need the constellation. You need lots of satellites on the world to accept that spectrum and to be able to process it and give you enough capacity. You need access to subscribers, which is where the MNOs come into play, right? They have access to the 6 billion subscribers around the globe. And then you need devices to be able to connect and have the right chipset in the devices. And so that's really the four value areas that we look at. And obviously, from a link, we are combining, merging with a company called Omnispace, who has a leader in the spectrum position. So obviously, we believe that having the constellation access to spectrum to help our MNO partners to have them have access to this is a very important in the value chain, and making sure that the constellation that we're building is not only accepting the new devices, but also all the way back to all the legacy devices, because in places like Africa and some of the Asian countries, you're going to have a long time before you get some of these newer devices in play. So we want to make it the most adaptable, flexible, and cost-effective constellation possible.
Yeah, in terms of M&A, that's, I mean, fully aligned with what Dan is saying, and you need at least these four components. And some of them are very challenging. I mean, setting up a constellation is not launching a separate satellite. We need to launch in a specific way, and it takes time. That's why actually we are seeing the first revenues coming from IoT, because we can deliver service on a discontinuous coverage. Spectrum is a challenge. So basically, these things are not necessarily concentrated just in one company, and sometimes this is good. The companies are getting together in a merge because you need this to be very successful. Okay, and getting the spectrum, which is not just not always available, but also takes a lot of time. Same to design, build, and launch, and then have the constellation up and running, and also having the devices getting ready for any new technology. We are seeing a huge convergence on this, and the chipset manufacturers are moving very fast on the new technologies. So that part is quite well covered, and the rest is a challenge for all of us. But we are very positioned, are very well positioned, and we think we are quite advanced compared to and moving quite faster than what it was before.
Samaya, if I can offer my perspective on this question. So my read is that I don't disagree with the points that were mentioned by Gianluca or Dan. But my read is that the competitive advantage of an NTN comes from a combination of spectrum, yes, standards, which is already works in progress, affordability, which is key, and scalability, and the user experience. I think user experience, in my view, is very important. If users are able to use the service as they do today, so when you go to travel to another country and you switch on your mobile, your smartphone, it connects directly to a roaming network easily without issues. So I think if the users have the same kind of experience when moving between TN and NTN, then that can help accelerate the adoption rate. I think recent M&A suggests that value is accruing less in raw satellite, I would say, alone, and more in spectrum distribution, which is, I think, also about partnerships with the MNOs and the ability to control service delivery. I think these are also critical and important to where value is really accruing.
I think it's from my side, if I can, let's say, put a concluding note on this. I see that definitely I agree with the panelists here that spectrum standards and commercial execution indeed plays a very important role together cohesively along with the standards. But often what is overlooked or let's say inhibits the smooth scale of the service is in fact the regulatory aspects, right? So entering markets or market access, as long as that is not harmonized between different countries, it is going to still be a hurdle for satellite operators like all of us here to be able to have a harmonized scale because every country comes with its own set of regulations. Like for example, today OK already has priority spectrum filings across the globe. We have market access in different countries, but even then we do realize that one of the major, let's say, hurdles to cross when it comes to scaling is definitely understanding the local regulatory requirements and navigating around it. And if this is harmonized, I mean, on the spectrum side, you have ITU, on the technology side, you have 3GPP, but today there is no standardized regulatory process for such a technology that is trying to scale globally, right? So this is where I see let's say associations like GSOA could also help and harmonize the way we approach market access. And I think that's one of the key points for me to consider as well.
Thanks for sharing, Prasanna. And I think this question raised a lot of other follow-up ones from the audience. So I'll start sharing some of them. And maybe you could take this one on too, because it's quite related. A question from Elio Tom: in D2D, is the biggest challenge building the best technology or securing the right partnership spectrum and market access?
I think I just answered that. It's in fact harmonizing the process of market access, right? Because the technology is there. I mean the technology is backed by the standards. In terms of spectrum, it is already harmonized at an ITU level. We know how to secure filings and so on. Of course, it's very scarce, so the one with the highest priority definitely has that edge or advantage, but that does not stop you from scaling. Let's say, or there are always different ways of figuring things out. But unless there is a harmonized mechanism to enter markets globally, and we have to navigate through different countries, different continents, and different local regulations. That I think is what is going to challenge global scale for us.
Yeah, I wanted just to say, I mean, the question is about is this the best technology? I mean, what we think is the best is that the technology is standard, because this makes the adoption fast and possible. And that's what it is. It doesn't mean that we don't focus on having the best technology, but to have the technology that allows to have the use cases working correctly and largely adoptable. Okay, so that's why the standard is the key one. And then of course, partners, access, and that's what we discussed before are super important. It's a question of time, and the question that we had, your question was very pertinent before. I mean, maybe somebody has a lot of frequency. It doesn't have technology. Somebody has technology, not the frequency. Who knows? You know, or the tech operator have a lot of customers and they want to have revenues outside of coverage. So many dimensions are still to be defined in the case of M&A, but it makes sense, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question on user experience, and Jazim, you spoke a bit about this topic as well. So a question from Adil Khan regarding the emergency use and messaging through D2D. The availability is still not high. Is there any push from the NTN community to increase the supported user experience in the market?
Sure, I can go for this as well. I think one of the aspects of UE support, I think this was also partially addressed by Link, right? So, I mean, the way we should look at it is there are going to be chipsets that are going to be release 17 and beyond, which will have native NTN capabilities. But at OQ, we also see a huge necessity to support phones that are pre-NTN releases. And I think that's where the added value lies in terms of scaling. For example, at OQ, we have already tested different pre-NTN release smartphones in our emergency broadcast test. And this is exactly what we aim to achieve and address, to be able to support a larger number of UEs, and we are working diligently on it.
Yeah, I'll add on from a link perspective. I mean, we've trialed this in 32 countries around the globe using MNO provided spectrum and handsets. And I think, just echoing that it's super important if you're going to do something that is mass market, it has to go backward compatible. It just can't be the future NTN devices. It's got to go back. What we found actually is that some of the older devices work better because they have a better antenna to them, which is kind of counterintuitive. But we have done emergency broadcasting in several countries across the globe, and we are actively testing with 32 mobile network operators on pretty much all continents. So it's just super important to be able, when you're building a constellation like we are at Link, is to be able to provide that access, both the different amount of spectrum, different types of spectrum, but also allow for legacy devices and the current 6 billion devices to be able to work seamlessly. We just don't want it to be on newer devices in the future.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Dan.
And Patrick Smith just put in the chat, we even demonstrated on Antarctica, which is true. So we've demonstrated this capabilities on all the continents. So and there's plenty of stuff on the web around some of the trials that we've done. So
yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, older smartphones being capable as well. So there's another question in chat, but more so on modern devices today. So a question from Anti Sirir Janin. Modern smart devices have over 20 antennas. So what is your view on how suppliers and major manufacturers will support both cellular and satellite spectrum? Will they be ahead or behind the ITU, WRC, FCC, and other regulatory agreements to use both spectrums for NTN?
Maybe I can try to take that question. So I don't think it's really a challenge in terms of the number of antennas in the devices, because what we have seen from our engagement with the OEMs is that you can see that their work in 3GPP and the support for inclusion of the L and S band MSS spectrum within the standards, which is N2255 and N256. So they're supportive of that. And there is also the OEMs in terms of the chipset vendors. So the likes of Qualcomm and MediaTek, they're already adopting the standards for NTN and including them into their chipset designs. I think the question is not a technical challenge, but it's more of a demand, demand confirmation that would come from the users as well as from the mobile operators, being the main distribution channel for addressing to address this market. So otherwise, I think on the device itself, I don't think that's a challenge, and the spectrum is already being added. In fact, other frequency bands are already being considered within 3GPP for inclusion for D2D and support of NTN.
Thanks, Jasim. Maybe pivoting over a little bit towards some of the challenges and risks that we're talking about. So one of the questions is also about, getting from pilots to rollout. What are we still underestimating today as we move through that phase? So what are operators still underestimating today about the cost and complexity of rollout?
Well, I don't think that we underestimate and I repeat it. There are a lot of promises, but what we are necessarily, what we necessarily need to do is to deliver. And space is hard. It takes a lot of efforts to have the satellites up and running and to make things working. We achieve that. We are in many places with customers, and we see a lot of challenges. Real life, as usual, is much harder than what we think. We learned a lot in these many years. So more than the under considering the challenges, we are trying to be as ready to any new difficulties we have in front of us. And you know what, the biggest thing is there's no problem on the access to space. I think the biggest challenge we might have is, of course, to have enough the speed of building the constellations. Okay, and that's one of the challenges that, of course, we are delivering year over year. So it's under development, but with a very clear roadmap. I don't see that there's a huge challenge that we are not seeing. I mean, unfortunately, we know very well the challenge we have in front of us. I don't know what my colleagues they think.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't think we're underestimating it, but I do think if you look again, there is a large amount of things that have to happen. You have to align spectrum, devices, subscribers, distribution, constellation. So you've got to get all of them right. If you don't have one of them, then you can't complete the circle. And so I think from an M&O point of view, it's actually somewhat straightforward, because from an M&O point of view, they're only dealing from the ground up, right? And this is my background. So we interconnect with, again, over 34 mobile network operators via standardized roaming. So for them, it's somewhat straightforward. They use it as a roaming. They have a PRL. They put it in the right, in the right slot, and off they go. And they're waiting for us to do the hard part, which is, get the constellation up and running and have enough satellites so that it is 24/7 service and not something that is sort of periodic. So, there's challenges in all of the above. I agree with Gianluca that I don't think we're underestimating it, but it is still a gigantic challenge to put this Rubik's Cube together. But it's coming together, and you see it coming together. You've got credible constellations being built. You've got credible MNOs all wanting to, have access to this constellation. I believe that there'll be in the near term, in the medium term, there will be a demand will outpace supply. So I think there's room for a lot of different providers in this space because it's such a gigantic need from an MNO point of view. I think it might take longer, as Jean-Luc said, because space is difficult. But I do think that we're actively looking, at least at Link, to put all those pieces together so that we've got a solution that's a mainstream solution.
Yeah, sorry, just to jump on it. I mean, so building a full constellation, it requires time, okay? And we are all working on it. The key thing here is how soon you can start delivering the type of services for a limited case of use or different limited use cases. But when do you start? Okay, so we have been working on this since the beginning, thinking we don't need to have the full constellation to be able to deliver service. Okay, and that's why now with our very special setup, we can deliver for IoT this continuous coverage that is quite good for many of the applications where you don't need to have a real time. Okay, so that's the first step that you need to do. And IoT is the first revenue stream because D2D, that takes a little bit more from a constellation point of view, you need to have real time. You cannot have a D2D without real time. Nobody wants to have a call that you can just call for a few minutes, or you don't want to send a WhatsApp and then wait a long time to have the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it well. There are challenges, but it's not about underestimating. It's more about making aware what the expectations and reality of the service capabilities are. And we have a couple of questions that came in the chat related to that. So I'll start off with a question asked by Augusto Delara. How are you planning to address indoor coverage limitations? Are there satellite side improvements on the roadmap to make the link more resilient in obstructed environments beyond what the device side can compensate for?
Sure. Maybe if I can go on this, definitely this is something that we have been looking into extensively from OQ side. The indoor coverage is a definite limitation in the current version of the waveform. Let's say when NB-IoT was started or standardized as part of release 13, and indoor coverage was a definite issue. And then eventually it moved on to coverage enhancements for release 14. And then this is when it comes to NTN, the way NB-IoT in release 17 was introduced definitely has some limitation in terms of mobility or coverage. And I believe what will definitely change the game is when the later releases of either 5G or even 6G standardization comes in. And I know that there is part of a working group that is working on, in fact, building from ground up. There are proposals I keep seeing as part of 3GPP where there are proposals for building the waveform from ground up, where it is not just retrofitted for NTN use cases as 5G waveform is being used, but it is always taken into consideration since day one that the waveform that we are using is resilient for both TN and NTN use cases and addresses such challenges such as limited indoor coverage and other aspects that come with retrofitting what was initially designed as a terrestrial technology for NTN use cases.
So maybe I can add to what Farzana mentioned. There is work within the standards with the 3GPP that would support to improve the link and allow for, or at least give the possibility of indoor coverage. But there are also other factors or other parameters that we can try to use, which is one would be the satellite design or the constellation design, which is the satellite size, the antenna, the improving the performance of the antenna, and we have seen over the years that satellite technology has been advanced, and the performance of the reflectors and the size of the reflectors is one key parameters that can be used by the satellite operators. The other point is, I think back to Gianluca is the technology. Designing the constellation, then densifying the constellation, deciding at what altitude the constellation will operate. It could be multiple of altitudes, different orbits. That would allow for or support, at least give the optionality for indoor coverage. I think third thing is really from the device side. So if you look at connected car, I mean, you will have an antenna on top of the car, and that is a concept that could potentially be explored for providing at least some sort of limited indoor service or indoor coverage. So that's another factor or another element that the satellite operators can use to or leverage to allow the possibility of indoor service.
Yeah, I think, look, at the end, I mean, we try to solve one thing at a time. And I think the biggest demand in the market is, can I have coverage where I don't have coverage from the MNOs, which is mainly outdoor, I would say largely outdoor. So that's what we try to solve. Because when you mix the service level with also the affordability, I think we're still far away from being more affordable than any terrestrial service. So indoor is very well covered by terrestrial service, and I think satellites should focus on outdoor. Doesn't mean that we can also go indoor in the future, but let's focus on the outdoor and make the outdoor working and being affordable, possible, with the right service level for everybody. This, as we know, it's 75-80% of the planet doesn't have any terrestrial coverage, and or even more. So that's where we focus now.
We have another question from the audience here. It says, how do you see profitability of such D2D services when large LEO constellations are requested for continuous services, but have to be renewed every 7 years due to LEO satellite lifetimes? So is there anyone who would like to take on this one?
I can comment just very quickly. I mean, the key thing here, and I said before, you need to be affordable and you need to be CapEx light, because you need to be profitable. And to be, why I say affordable, because maybe what is going to be I mean, I don't believe that people will pay a lot of money to watch Netflix or any streaming on a remote area. I think the key killer applications will be messaging, some voice, and maybe some really small packages of data. So the constellation, they should not be built to support a huge quantity of data connectivity and so on, but should be very well positioned to be profitable.
Which almost answers the second question that we have from Danielle. What type data experience you expect on D2D with your first constellation if you receive spectrum needs? So I think that question is also covered by this. Another question from the audience here is, what are the panelists' thoughts on the key challenges involved in developing dual-use D2D systems? Clearly, there are many use cases in the commercial market, but there are also many use cases in theater, especially in the tactical comms domain, and links obviously back to Sovereign Point. Prasanna, would you like to comment on this one?
Sure. I think when it comes to sovereignty or dual use, one of the major, I would not say challenges, but for companies or satellite operators who we are already looking into, let's say, innovative technologies, it's more about how we can package something that's already innovative and new to be able to fit and also be acceptable for dual use regulations, right? So having a selling innovative technology to the mass market or the commercial market is one thing, but understanding the economics and the intricacies behind how to follow processes when it comes to dual use technologies and navigating through them, that's a whole different ball game altogether, right? And for that to be able to work with even with let's say tried and tested technologies, it's always a challenge to make it work for dual use, even though there are use cases existing. But when you're talking about innovative technologies, even for the process uh, makers or the rule makers, they're also discovering this along with us, and I think it's going to take a lot of collaborative efforts between the private industry and the institutional stakeholders when it comes to bringing such a technology into dual use.
Thank you. Anyone else to add anything on this? I guess we have a next question to go to from Augusto Delara. Are there any plans to extend NTN support to CubeSats similar to how it currently works with GEO and LEO satellites? Specifically, I'm interested in establishing direct-to-device to CubeSat link rather than device GeoGround, while keeping the existing NTN protocol stack largely unchanged. So, would anyone like to tackle this one?
Sure. I think we started with CubeSats. We started connecting NBA OT devices using CubeSats. I see Gianluca already smiling. That's another company that's been doing it after us. We also, in fact, demonstrated an emergency broadcast using one of our CubeSats. So yes, we are not looking at, let's say, device to geo to ground. We are working in the space of using CubeSats. Of course, for commercial scaling, we might have to go to, let's say, slightly bigger platforms. But CubeSat technologies have already matured today to be able to serve commercially for specific use cases for such technologies.
Yeah, so we started with CubeSat. CubeSat has a lot of advantages because it's a fast way to start the service, like a minimal viable solution that you can put there. We did 2 satellites for testing. Now we have 4 flying on the same. It's the first part of the constellation. We're launching other 5 this year, and they are all small sats. Okay. We also think that's a good way to start, but then you need to to grow because you need to expand your capacity and the footprint you can cover and the capacity of processing, the type of antenna, the type of solar panels. So that's why we are already on the generation 2, which is much bigger, which is 160 kilo. Okay, and normal CubeSat maybe it's around 10 kilos, just to give you an idea. So it's 15, 16 times bigger.
There's one question for Link here, so Dan, maybe you can help us out. How does Link plan to address the coverage continuity problem, the gaps between LEO satellite passes as you scale beyond messaging into real-time services?
So again, it's a combination of having more satellites. So we're putting a constellation that will have 24/7 connectivity by middle to end of next year. So you have to get the base constellation up. The constellation that we're building is a multi-spectrum, multi-beam, multi-orbit. So not only is it going to take the newer MSS-based spectrum and accept that spectrum, but also the legacy terrestrial quote unquote spectrum that MNOs bring. And then we are also connecting, we're the only ones connecting our LEO satellites to our partner SES. They're a major partner of ours, and we're connecting it to their MEO constellation for backhaul. So if you think about it, right out of the gate with a certain number of satellites in the middle of next year, the constellation will be 24/7, and we'll be able to do light data, which will include things like WhatsApp voice, regular voice, mobile money, and light data applications, basically anything on your phone outside of streaming, the Netflix or YouTube.
Thank you. And we have one more question here. How do we plan to solve the higher throughput requirement of data with FR2 or FR3 frequencies, but then link budget constraints comes into play? How do we balance the two for the D2D and NTN?
I think
Yassine,
it really,
Prasanna?
yeah, sure. I think it really depends on the type of devices. So D2D for me is a very broad, let's say, category, right? So it could be even within 3GPP, devices are classified differently. So are we talking about handles? Are talking about dedicated terminals? Like for example, you have terminals on board cars. You have terminals on board containers, and so on. So it really depends on what type of terminal device we are talking about. Yes, of course, there is definitely a trade-off on the link budget, the use case that can be delivered for a certain specific data range, and the type of devices, the type of antennas. Of course, all of these indeed comes into play, but that doesn't mean that it restricts NTN connectivity or NTN services in any form. We just have to choose the right type of device. It's a matter of choosing the right type of device for the right type of service. But from a satellite perspective, of course, we will be starting small, all of us, addressing the most immediate needs where there is a huge market traction, simply because that's what allows businesses to scale, right? So I think that covers the question here. Maybe I let my fellow panelists answer or add to the thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I can add something, Prasanna. Thank you. I think, like the other panelists said earlier, that the focus is to provide messaging, emergency messaging, IoT, voice over IP, kind of sort of the initial services as well as data. But going into higher data services or higher data rate services, that is going to be certainly possible with the advancement in technology. That's one which is on the satellite side as well as on the device side. But if you look at it from the standard perspective, I think you can see that there are certain implementations or techniques that are going to help with increasing the data rate. For example, within release 18, the 5G advanced, there is capacity and spectrum expansion. There is the carrier aggregation, the addition of other spectrum bands into the standard. That will allow for delivering higher data rate or higher throughput sort of services. Then also goes into release 19, which is 5G advanced phase 2. You have the regenerative satellites and the system integration. Those are also going to contribute to offering better user experience as well as better services. And then you have the network densification. I think Dan also mentioned earlier about how we can offer 24 by 7 services and think progress on evolution of our services through network densification, as well as using the different orbits, a multi-orbit kind of system, to allow us to benefit or leverage those kind of techniques in order to deliver higher throughput or higher data rate services. But again, I think back to the point zero, I would say is the key focus today is on offering the basic services. This is what the customer needs, and this is what the customer needs to experience, so that it builds that experience and attaches to the NTN network, and that will accelerate the adoption. And then we move on from there into service evolution that will match what's happening within the standards as well as on the constellation or on the system side as well.
Thanks, Jassim, and thanks to the GSOA team for taking on the Q&A function, as I also am a huge proponent for making sure we all have reliable internet everywhere. So maybe just to close off as we come to the end of the hour, I have one fire shot question over here for all the panelists looking out into the future, so 2027 and beyond. What single milestone will prove that this market has reached an inflection point? Do you think it's active paying users, better device attach rates, spectrum harmonization, positive unit economics, or feel free to add on with your own thoughts?
Okay. I think the first milestone, I would not say it's going to be just a single milestone. I think there are a lot of milestones to achieve, but what would be the most exciting milestone from my opinion, or from my perspective, uh, is to have a smartphone in my own hands, to be able to connect to satellites and have that feeling of relief that I am always connected. And I think that's what every smartphone user wants to see today, wants to have today. And when every smartphone user starts thinking like this and actually is able to experience this on a day-to-day basis, and I think that's what we are all trying to deliver, right? So I think that's the most appealing milestone for me personally, but I believe others can add to it.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think I agree with Prasanna, and we've mentioned many factors that contribute into the success of D2D. But if I have to pick one sort of milestone, then my view would be that would be device attach rates and the proliferation of NTN enabled devices. I think mass adoption depends on built-in compatibility. Spectrum harmonization, availability definitely matters. Other factors, of course, matter, but spectrum is more of an enabler than the ultimate sort of proof. Revenue and repeat usage matter more.
Thanks, Jasim, and maybe Dan.
Yeah, so I won't review what they just said. I totally agree with what they said. I'll take it in a little slightly different direction. So one of my favorite question in the chat is, what is the realistic timeline for transitioning from text messaging to heavy data? Are we talking about 3 years or 10 years under 6G standards? So that made me chuckle. That's a great question because it shows how far the industry has come. 5 years ago, we were debating with mobile network operators the link budget and would it work? And I don't think it's going to work, and I want to see it. And we've got real revenue. There's a significant amount of revenue that's being had in the industry through it. And for us to pivot the mindset between will it work to when will it work with heavy data on 6G, it is an amazing emotional pivot to, people just want more and more and more, and so more satellites, more spectrum, more devices, all of the above. But I can tell you, and you can see from the questions, that it's already hit that inflection point, that it's just a matter of how fast can we get all this done.
Absolutely. And Gianluca, any parting thoughts?
Well, you're running late a little bit on time, and I mean, they've been covering absolutely perfectly. I mean, I don't have anything to add really. We're all aligned, and it's super nice to see that. I mean, if I can say just the two words, I mean, when I started pitching the telecom operators 6 years ago, I think everybody thought we were absolutely crazy, and now we are here talking about the reality. And they're just talking about, okay, how long it's going to take, how much money it's going to cost, and how can we tweak the services to make the perfect service for the customers. So that's a fantastic. It's a dream. It's a dream coming true. So congratulations to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you. So that does bring us to the end of today's session. Any questions that we did not have time to answer during the live program will be addressed in writing and posted with the video on the GSOA website, provided that they are relevant to today's topic. You may watch the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel and at gsoa.space. Please join GSOA in the next webinar, Cybersecurity in Space, which is taking place on Thursday, May 28th at 3 o'clock UK time. So feel free to visit the GSOA website for details on the upcoming webinars or to watch any of the previous sessions as well. And a special thank you to today's panelists for sharing their valuable insights, to our audience for your thoughtful questions and active participations, and patience with the webinar. Enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Thank you.